Hey Science Nines, it's Manchak here with your very first video lesson for Concept E1 in Unit E, our last unit of Science 9. Can you believe that we are almost all about the way through Science 9 and we've done a good chunk of this semester in this remote sort of situation, and we're going to cover basically 2.5 units, well, basically 2 full units in this sort of isolation teaching and learning environment. It's incredible. You guys have been amazing so far, and I can't believe how well you've done with handling all of this, getting your work done, those kinds of things. So kudos to you guys for sticking your way through it, and making this possible with what's been going on in our world today. What I'm going to do in this video lesson, it's going to be relatively short compared to what I normally do, because I'm going to try something different for this lesson, and then I hope to get your feedback on it relatively quickly, so that I know whether this is something that I should continue to do or whether it's something I should scrap. Basically, what I'm trying to do in it right now, and how I'm going to switch things, is I'm going to stop trying to reinvent the wheel here. Instead of me just yammering on at you in front of my notes like I would normally do in class, I'm going to rely on some of the awesome stuff that's out there on the internet, particularly on YouTube, to sort of fill in some of the blanks that my notes don't fill in. So I'm going to explain how that's going to work in a second. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to our final unit. And you can tell by my silly meme over here that we are going to be dealing with a unit on space. Okay, so I'm going to just move myself over here, and I'm going to go flip over to our concept checklist. Remember, you can find your concept checklist in the same spot it's always been, at the top of the Google Classroom, under general information. It's in there. So what we're doing now is Unit E, which is called Space Exploration. And we're going to be having 4 concepts, 4 general outcomes that we're going to try to cover throughout this unit. The first one is we're going to investigate and describe ways that human understanding of Earth and space has depended on technological development. Then we're going to identify problems in developing technologies for space exploration, describe the technologies developed for life in space, and explain the principles involved, the scientific principles involved. We'll demonstrate and interpret the science of optical and radio telescopes, as well as space probes and remote sensing technologies. And then finally, we'll identify any issues and opportunities arising from the application of space technology, identify alternatives involved, and analyze any applications. So you're going to find I'm playing with my hair a lot because it is getting super long and I'm getting super annoyed by it. But whatever, that's the way it is. There's going to be 5 concepts that we'll cover in this unit, just like we have in all the other units that we've covered together. Our first concept is going to go all over the place. We're going to start out with some early views and kind of like a history lesson of space exploration and our understanding of space. And then we're going to get into talking a little bit about stars and sort of what's out there in space as far as stars go, and things like galaxies and the life cycles of stars and star systems and all of that kind of stuff, but relatively general stuff. The second one, we're going to look at concept E2, which will be next week. We'll look at what's going on in sort of our solar neighborhood, the area around us, how we can talk about things that are up in space. So you'll learn about terms like azimuth, and try to tie in some of the tools that we look at in E1 to this. We'll also talk a little bit about the motions and predictions of motions and alignment in space. And some of the videos you're going to watch this week will outline little bits and pieces of that. E3 is going to have us looking at space transport, living in space, and applications to Earth. So how have we adapted to living in a space environment? What are the challenges associated with that? How do we get people up into space? And how have some of those things translated to important discoveries for us here on Earth rather than just the astronauts up in space? E4 is going to look at technology related to seeing and interpreting space. So if you think about that, that's obviously going to use telescopes, those kinds of things, but we'll dig a little bit deeper into other kinds of ways that we see into space and how we interpret what's going on out in space with these bits of technology. And then lastly, we'll just do a little bit on space, society, and the environment, trying to link those aspects together of space science with society and the environment. So that's sort of where we're going with all of that. I hope it makes sense. Today, we're going to be working on concept E1. So we're going to have a look at the different ideas about the nature of Earth, space, based on culture, and compare it, including some Aboriginal views as well, which we'll highlight briefly. We're going to investigate and illustrate technological advances, of the different kinds of tools that we've used to look at or measure what's going on in space. And we'll look at some of the history associated with that. So the geocentric versus heliocentric models, how we understand our place in our solar system and in the larger universe. Then we'll get into talking right at the very end about how we describe distances in space, and then what stars are and how stars work and how planets and stars form, those kinds of things. So that's the general gist of what we're doing in this concept. So now I'm going to get into very briefly how I'm going to switch things up with you guys, and I've shown this to you several times. This is my plan and my map for how I want you guys to work through the unit, and then I base all the stuff that you see on the Google Classroom on this particular sort of plan that I put together for you. Now, this plan is going to be a little bit different this week. Okay, and I'm trying an experiment, and you guys are going to be my guinea pigs, and we're going to see how this works. Like I said back in the intro, I feel like I'm just sitting and recording a 40-minute me blabbering on to you guys, just basically going through the notes and explaining things. I can imagine that if I was you sitting on that end, it would probably get pretty boring after a while. So what I've tried to do instead is I've set up a series of videos for you that I think match up very nicely with the concepts and ideas that we're covering in this concept. I've pulled these videos off of YouTube. I've watched all of them. The content is good and it matches up. Sometimes you got to dig a little bit to find the information that we're looking for. But what I'm going to ask you guys to do is when you get past this video, you will find in the Google Classroom a Science 9 E1 YouTube playlist. Okay, and what I'm going to ask you to do is get your notes out for Concept E1 and for Unity, and you'll find those notes in the Google Classroom under Notes and Worksheets. Okay, you'll be able to click on that and find the handout 1. These are your notes for the unit. And what I'm going to ask you guys to do is click on this playlist link here. And that playlist link is going to bring up a playlist associated with this concept. So Science 9, Concept E1. And all I'm going to ask you guys to do is hit play. And it's going to work its way through, I forgot, 5 videos, not 4 videos. And I think if I added it up, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 minutes of videos, and it should play nonstop from the first video all the way through. If you need to pause, go for a bathroom break, grab something to drink, whatever it is, go ahead and do that. Okay, follow along with your notes. And I think I've kind of done it that it follows relatively sequentially in your notes as well. My notes are obviously different than what the videos are going over, but I hope that you guys will find some similarities and differences in that. Then what I'd like you guys to do is think back to the video. So what I'm going to do is have you guys go through this, go through the videos. You've got the playlists. You can go through them again if you need to. And then I'm going to have you guys either remember what happens after in this video lesson I'm recording now, or go back to the video lesson after you've done this, and I'm going to just go through and highlight with you what I think are the most important points out of the notes that I want you guys to get. Now, when we're looking at the notes, I want you guys to use the notes as the guide to what you can expect to find on a quiz, whether it's formative or summative. Okay, so I will pull stuff out of your notes rather than pulling stuff out of the videos, okay, because it's too easy to miss something in a video. It's too easy for you to go, well, I don't think that's important, so I'm not going to worry about it. So quizzes will be based out of the notes, but the videos work with the notes to make sure that you guys learn a little bit more deeply about what's going on. Okay. When we get, just finishing up the format and how we're going to change things, when we get to your formative and summative quizzes, your practice quiz and your quiz that's for marks, I am going to allow you now to do them open book. I don't know if you've been doing that already. I can't be sitting there looking over your shoulder saying, hey, you're not supposed to do that. So for now, I would like you guys to you can now work on open book quizzes. I am, however, going to make the questions just a little bit more difficult so that it's a little harder to find the answers to them. Okay, and we're going to see how this works. Again, it's an experiment for you. It's also an experiment for me to figure out how this goes. Okay, so the last thing then is once you've done the quizzes and worked your way through the concept, I'm going to have one more little quiz or survey for you guys to do on whether or not you think this format worked. And so I'll ask a few questions in one of the Google forums again and ask you to submit your answers and be honest about how it works. If you like the old format, I'll switch back to the old format. If you like this new format, if you find it a little bit easier, a little more entertaining, whatever it is, by all means. Okay. There's a lot of great content out on YouTube from a lot of great educators. I don't have time to do what they do. I don't have the production facility to allow that. So I think that they're doing great work. I'd like to support them in some way, get them a few more hits and let them do some of your education too. As always, I will be available for you guys to help out, right? So if there's something that's not making sense in the notes, there's something that's not making sense in a video, hey, fire me an email, track me down, let me know what's going on. And if I find that there might be something that I need to explain a little bit, then I will tack it onto one of these little videos for you so you can see me explaining things. So I think at this point, if you wanted to hit pause right now, you can hit pause and then go and watch the playlist. Okay. If you want to continue on, what I'm going to do is bring in the notes for concept E1, and we're going to just quickly run through the highlights of what I think is important in the notes. And then you guys can either watch the videos after or watch this part of the video after you've watched the videos. I don't know if that made sense, but we're going to play around with it here. So hit pause now. Okay, and those of you that are coming back or didn't hit pause, here we go with what is in the notes and what I think is important for us to work with. Okay, so first things first, remember that we've got page numbers associated with what's going on in this unit or this concept, so you can always find this stuff as well in your textbook. I would like you guys to spend some time learning a couple of these different views about the cosmos, about the universe outside of what we've got going on. Spend some time looking through some of this, and I've just highlighted a bunch. I would in particular like to highlight for you the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit perspectives on how the Earth works and how we situate ourselves in the cosmos. It's fascinating. It's also very relevant to where we are here in Canada, whether you're talking about the Cree people or the Inuit up in the north. It's really worthwhile having a look at that kind of stuff. But then we've got some other ancient cultures as well, like the Egyptians and other Aboriginal people in southern Alberta, right? So do have a flip through and see if you can, have some comfort with a couple of these on here, 2 or 3, let's say. I want you to know the difference between solstice and equinox, and I want you to understand when a solstice happens and when an equinox happens for us here in the northern hemisphere. And I want you guys to understand what dates those happen on. So the fact, and it says right in here, winter solstice, December 21st, summer solstice, June 21st, and we're coming up on summer solstice pretty quick here. Understand what an equinox is. What does that mean? Here's a hint. EQU, right, that we've got in here, that is referring to equal. So think of equal as in, equal day and night kind of thing. And then know when those dates fall for us roundabout here in the northern hemisphere. I need you guys to be able to distinguish between the geocentric and heliocentric models of where Earth is located in our solar system. Okay, so I want you guys to be able to work your way through and figure out what heliocentric is, what geocentric is, and be able to play around with that. It would be great if you had some names associated with that. So Aristotle, Copernicus, right? Those kinds of things. Kepler comes in later on, and there's a whole other video that I left out on Kepler and what he came up with, far beyond what we need to know. You might recognize names like Pythagoras and Euclid from last year in Science 8. Galileo, Kepler, Copernicus, you probably heard about them in Social 8 when you studied the Renaissance. So that's kind of interesting too. The next section is all about some of the things that we've used to track days, stars, figure out distances, all of those kinds of things. And these are all tools that different astronomers have used to learn more about space. I would like you guys to be able to, sort of associate a picture with a name, if you can, as best you can, and then be able to tell me at least something about one of these tools and how it might be used. And I'll pick and choose a few of them. We're going in here from the top here down to the bottom, getting more and more complex and moving closer to where we are now. I definitely want you guys to understand this thing called an astronomical unit, and I want you to understand this thing called a light year. Be able to define them and tell me relative to each other how long they are. Okay, what is an astronomical unit? What does it measure about how long it is? And then what is a light year? What does it measure about how far is that distance as well? Okay. And then I'm going to skip a little bit. You've got some practice questions you can do out of the textbook as well. And then this next section here is talking about sort of where we find matter in space and how it's distributed, and how it works. And really it's focusing in on stars a lot, which are basically glowing balls of gas that are being fueled by a nuclear reaction, which is really cool. I want you guys to remember these names, Hertzsprung and Russell, okay, and what they are known for. And Hertzsprung and Russell came up with this diagram, which shows us the distribution of stars in the galaxy. What we have are main sequence stars, we got the white dwarfs, red giants, supergiants, and kind of have an idea that that's what they came up with to try to explain what stars are and how they're distributed in the universe. Then I want you guys to understand how stars are formed, and the life cycle that they go through, because there is a life cycle. Since the Big Bang, we've seen lots of stars go out of existence because they've exploded and then they've come back again. So what is that difference and how is that working? So there's a diagram here that shows you the life cycle of a star. I would highly recommend that you know bits and pieces on this and the general progression through. There's also a video in the playlist that goes over this as well. But everything starts out as a nebula, just a bunch of matter floating around in space, often gases, but other matter that's floating around after a star explodes. And then it really depends on whether we're dealing with a big star, much bigger than Earth, we would call or much bigger than our star, we would call a massive star, or about a stable stage star, which is the same size as our sun, which is also called Sol, S-O-L. And then it talks about what happens as they go through their stable stage, they're doing their nuclear reactions, all of that kind of stuff. Then eventually it runs out of juice. Okay, and then that's what's going on further on along in here, is that we've got the process of that kind of star dying, and the process of the really big stars going through and dying. Okay, know some of these terms. Know that our star, when it starts to die, will start to expand gradually into what's called a red giant, and then eventually it's going to just pop out into existence, and it'll form a planetary nebula with a white dwarf at the center where our star used to be. And when that white dwarf burns out, it turns into a black dwarf. Really big stars, many times the size of our Earth, or of our star, pardon me, that we orbit around as a planet, they go into a red supergiant sort of state, undergo a supernova where they collapse and then boom, explode massively, turning into a neutron star or a black hole, depending on their size. Okay, so know a bit about that, please, and how that works. Knowing some of those terms like red giant, supergiant, supernova, white dwarf, black hole, all of those things are going to be very important. And then just understand when I talk about what a constellation is versus what an asterism is, versus what a galaxy is, those kinds of things. I want you guys to sort of understand what those terms refer to. Those are the big things for Concept E1 that I want you guys to understand. And one of the big ones for me in this is vocabulary. Please focus in on those words in your notes that were bolded and underlined or just bolded. Those terms are really, really important, and I've highlighted a lot of them on here. Understand what they are, spend some time with that vocabulary to learn it. Okay, so that's everything for me. That's all I'm going to talk to you guys about in this unit, unless you need some extra help, unless you feel like you need a little bit of a work through on something. So just to recap what I want you guys to do. If you haven't already, watch the playlist that I have of these 5 videos that'll walk you through Concept E1. Please go and watch that with your notes handy. Maybe scribble some notes in along the way in the margins if you need, if you want to. Okay, once you've done all of that, then make sure you go back and focus in on what I just talked about, those important bits of information that I highlighted as we moved through the notes for this concept. These are the things that I think are most important and will likely pop up in some way on your quiz for this concept. Okay, after you've done all of that, don't forget that there is some extra work you can do. There's the textbook questions if you want to, and then there's also a worksheet on the Google Classroom under Resources, Notes, and Worksheets inside Unit E. You can do just Part A in there, or any questions that you think relate to what we've talked about. If it's not in there, doesn't make sense to you, we probably haven't covered it yet, don't worry about it, okay? Once you're done all of that and you're feeling comfortable, do your practice quiz, okay? You can do the practice quiz as open book, see how it goes, wait for my feedback, and I will send you feedback. And then I'll send you a reminder that your summative quiz, like I said, we're experimenting. I will let that be open book as well for your summative quiz. Okay, that's it for today. If you guys have any questions about this new format, if you have any questions about anything that's going on in this concept, by all means, come and track me down, fire me an email, pop in for one of my office hours and, get some help from me in that way. If you can't make an office hour, I will make time for you during the school day. You just have to let me know when it's going to work and we will sort it out. All right, I think that's all I have to say to you. As always, stay healthy, and we'll talk soon when we get into concept. Oh, I forgot one last thing. And then when you're done the summative quiz, please go through and answer the quick survey on how you think this new format worked. Did it work for you? Did it not? Answer the questions that I'm going to have in there, and be honest with your responses, because I want to do what's best for you guys. I'm just trying something new to do a little experimentation. Okay. Talk soon. Concept E2 is up next.